Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Cheryl, and I'm joined today by Vanessa and special guest Joe, and we're going to be talking about how to improve the learning experience with high-quality audio in higher education facilities. But before we get into that, just a few items of housekeeping. First of all, it's important to note that as you may notice from our cameras here, we are broadcasting to you from our homes and not from our usual controlled environments. Because of that, we might run into some audio or technical difficulties. If we do, please just be patient. We'll try to push through those. We just think this information is way too important to wait, so just please be forgiving if we run into any technical issues. Second of all, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. It usually takes us about a week or so to get it edited and ready, but once it is, it will be viewable at shure.com/webinars. You can see this webinar and all of our past recorded webinars, so please feel free to go to shure.com/webinars and see all of our great webinar sessions. And then lastly, as we go through the session today, if you have any questions, please type those into the question pane. Please note that we will hold on questions until the end of the session, so type in your question and be patient. If you can't find the question section and you're logged in through the web app, just look for that little circle with the question mark and click on that to access the questions. Or if you're logged in through the GoToWebinar sort of desktop app, you can look for a dark gray toolbar with an orange box with a white arrow. Click on that orange box with a white arrow, and that will give you access to the question panes. Type those in, be patient, and we will get to as many of those as we can at the end of the session. All right, that wraps up all the housekeeping. Let's get into the good stuff. Take it away, Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I appreciate that awesome introduction. So again, we're here today to discuss improving the learning experience with high quality audio in your higher education facilities. So a little bit about myself. My name is Vanessa Jensen. I'm responsible for market development for Shure Systems products in the Northeast. We are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Joe Way, who is the Director of Learning Environments at University of Southern California. And he's going to be sharing with us a really exciting installation over at USC in about 20 minutes time. So hang tight for that information. So high quality audio to meet the demands of higher education. I think we can all agree on one thing, and that is it's a new world. There have been significant changes in the last 6 months or so that will shape how we go to classes in the short term. So I think a lot of universities, what we're seeing are updating, they're adding, they're supplementing their teaching spaces so that they can provide that streaming and distance learning capability so that students can continue the learning process, right? They can maintain that social distance regulation or provide that content remotely via a web conference. And so today, this webinar, my section, will focus on the following. So we're going to discuss how you can improve presentations and discussions with your high quality audio in order to enhance that student learning experience. We'll also highlight some considerations that should be taken into account when you're designing and implementing AV systems for sound reinforcement, distance learning, and lecture capture. And lastly, we'll discuss how you can enhance your audio experience all while maintaining those all-important social distancing regulations. So let's jump in. Before we get started, and for those who are unfamiliar, Shure is a 95-year young company. We're founded in 1925 in Chicago, Illinois, and at present day sold in over 120 countries. With 30 offices, 5 engineering centers, and 2 manufacturing facilities worldwide, Shure is truly a global organization. In terms of the markets that we focus on and the customers that we serve, here's a brief overview for you. So what you'll see here is we have theater, AV rental, touring sound, we have broadcast, venues, and house of worship. All of this falls more on the professional audio realm. We also focus on music listening, music enjoyment, content, and music creation. Beyond that, in the systems integration market, we focus heavily on government, corporate, presentation, conference, and education. And really the products that we discussed today will actually touch all 5 of these markets. That's because they are really geared at providing that high quality speech vocal reinforcement. And in terms of those products, we have to talk about the key highlights here. So in terms of our microphones, dead center in this slide, you'll see the SM58, Arguably, Shure's most famous microphone, found worldwide on stages, used in gigs and tours and presentations as well. On the system side, we have our Microflex Advanced family of products. So MXA 910 truly has changed the way that conferencing is accomplished. The MXA 310 is the little brother to the MXA 910. And we're also really excited with the newest addition to that MXA family, which is the MXA 710 linear array microphone. Lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about the Motive family. So you'll see the MV5 and the MV51 on the right-hand side of this slide. Personally, today I'm using the MV51 for this presentation. I use it quite often when I'm attending video conferences and meetings remotely. So we'll touch on how those can be used for personal use. Beyond microphones, we also offer a number of headphones and earphones, wired, wireless, with Bluetooth, as well as noise cancellation capabilities. These are really designed for critical listening, recording, as well as kind of personal communication, and again, that musical enjoyment, so to speak. So it's a wireless world. Shure is definitely focused on wireless microphones and in-ear monitoring. These can be found on stages in houses of worship, educational facilities, at festivals, shows, broadcast studios even. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Axion Digital, ULXD, and our brand new wireless system, SLXD Digital. Continuing on that wireless train, let's talk a little bit about wireless conferencing and discussion systems. So on the left-hand side of the slide, we have MXW, which is our Microflex wireless line. These consist of wireless transceivers that can be used for remote collaboration via video conferencing. On the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see MXCW. That is a wireless discussion system. We do offer a wired version, which is not pictured here, but the wireless version does offer a lot of flexibility in terms of being extremely portable and being able to be used in really structured meetings. So you'll see you have both a gooseneck and a loudspeaker on that base. So that kind of eliminates the need for any external PA reinforcement. It also allows you to accept and actually participate in some onboard voting. So a very flexible wireless solution, again, for kind of conferencing and discussions. Moving on to the Shure ecosystem, and this is something I'm really excited about. Earlier in June, we launched the Shure ecosystem. We have had a number of input transducers for quite some time and processors. We're really excited to now add an output transducer and really kind of round out that signal chain. So from the microphone side, again, the MXA series microphones, we've got that MXA 910 ceiling array microphone, MXA 310 table array mic, and the MXA 710, which is, again, that newest addition to that family, which is a linear array and really does offer the most flexible form factor yet. In terms of our processing, we have the P300, which is our conferencing microphone processor. And earlier this year at ISE, we introduced Intellimix Room, which is a revolutionary audio processing software that runs seamlessly in the background on Room PCs and supports your soft codec applications. And just to kind of round out the signal chain, we have the MXN5WC, which is our networked Dante-enabled PoE-powered ceiling speaker. And last but not least, I can't forget the MXA Mute, which we also introduced earlier in June. The MXA Mute is a great way to add a mute button to the table so that you can mute your ceiling microphone, for example. So really, this is truly a complete end-to-end audio solution for meetings and for collaboration, and really excited to talk about these products here today. No ecosystem would be complete without software. So we have Designer and System On to complement our ecosystem offerings. Designer is used to quickly and easily configure and deploy your Shure networked audio solution. It can also be used to import a room layout and place virtual devices so that you can reliably predict how many microphones are required for a given space. System On is your remote monitoring and management software tool for your ecosystem. And then when we start looking at channels and wireless workbench, these are more geared towards our wireless microphone portfolios and our professional audio market. However, if you're a university that has a significant amount of RF on campus, wireless workbench can certainly be your friend. So now that we've reviewed our market focus, product offerings, and the customers that we serve, let's discuss how these solutions can be used in the classroom to provide consistent, high-quality audio in your higher ed spaces. And we're going to do this by actually looking at a number of different room examples by size. We're going to start with a very large space. We'll go large, medium, small, mobile cart, and solo. So let's jump right in and let's look at that very large room. So on the right-hand corner, you'll see a top-down view of a very large lecture hall. Now, I understand there might be spaces that are a bit larger, but this is just going to serve as an example for us to get started. In this particular space, we have a professor, and we need to provide that reinforcement to the students. So you'll see that professor at the front. We marked him with a green dot. We're going to give him an Axion Digital transmitter. Now, Axion Digital is our top-tier wireless digital system. It offers extremely robust, unprecedented signal stability and reliability in the most complex, congested RF environments. So if you have a campus that has a lot of RF devices, you're located in a city or near a city, choosing a system that uses spectrum efficiently and is more reliable can be extremely important. So beyond that, we do offer RF protection with Axion Digital. We have low latency with our digital audio. It is Dante audio, and we do offer AES 256-bit encryption with that system as well, so you can be assured of the security of your audio message. Now, the body pack, micro body pack, and handheld transmitters are available in the system, and we're going to give this professor a handheld microphone in this example, as you can see in the picture just below that top-down view of our lecture hall. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to pick up his audio, and we're going to route it to the loudspeakers so that we have a simple voice reinforcement system in this classroom. But what about if we needed to provide distance learning? In this example, we can add an MXA 910 in the ceiling, and it's just behind that first row, closer to that second row. We would arrange those lobes, they're indicated in that green color, to cover the front area, so that professor is picked up regardless of which side of that front professor area he's located on. Now, that blue line that you see from the MXA 910 to the door indicates the network path from the 910 to your PoE switch. And that's, you can see in more detail on the schematic on the left-hand side of the slide. Now, that MXA 910 has a single category cable, again, for power, Dante audio, and control, and that's connected into our PoE switch. In this case, we're using the P300 conferencing mic processor, and that's also connected to the switch. And this allows us to send our near-end audio from that professor, it's in the front of the room, to the far end, and then also receive back that far end into the speakers in the classroom. Now, truly the benefit of the MXA 910 in this application is the professor has freedom of movement in that front of the classroom. He doesn't have to worry about microphone technique. Am I holding the microphone close enough to my mouth when I'm speaking? Did I accidentally use it as a pointer? So with that, there's no need for microphone technique on your professors. There's no need to worry about rechargeable batteries or disposable batteries at all. So you do have a much simpler to use system from the professor's perspective. Also, there's possibility for recording and streaming as well as a voice lift, which we're going to talk a little bit about next. Now, that P300 has the capability to support a soft codec system via the USB connection, as well as a hardware codec with the analog inputs and outputs on that system. So we have a little bit of flexibility in terms of our connectivity in this particular large room. Now, what about if we needed that distance learning plus some reinforcement in this very large classroom? So again, this is that same large room. We've just blown up the view here, and we've added an additional 4 MXA 910s. What we could do then is we can use those front 3 arrays to pick up that professor area. We can use the middle array to pick up the center of rows 2 and 3. And for the students seated on the extreme corners, on the extreme left, we'll use that front left array. And that'll also pick up people on the left-hand side of rows 1 and 2. Similar on the right-hand side. And for those individuals that like to sit in the back, we'll use those right and left rear arrays, both to cover the sides of the 3rd row as well as the 4th row. So in this particular example, we've covered this entire lecture hall, right? We've got consistent coverage regardless of where your students are seated. So if you have to space individuals out, you don't have to worry about whether or not that individual is covered with a microphone. Now let's talk a little bit about the reinforcement side of it. So if we're picking up the professor in the front of the room and we're also using the speakers in the front of the room to send that audio out, unfortunately, there will be quite a bit of feedback. So the answer instead is to use a zoned speaker system and really to use what's called voice lift. So in this example, we would use a series of networked loudspeakers, such as the new MXN 5WC. Keep in mind that voice lift requires really careful planning to ensure that there's no feedback and to ensure that all of your audio is routed to the proper place. And I think at this point, it's important to differentiate voice lift from sound reinforcement. So sound reinforcement is a system that's really designed to amplify sound, including voices, to such levels that it can be understood in very, very noisy environments and at great distances from the loudspeaker. So think about, an outdoor concert venue. That is certainly, sound reinforcement or PA. In this very large room in this lecture hall, we're going to use voice lift, which by comparison is only going to restore the natural speech level from a talker to the farthest listeners in a room. So if the professor is talking at the front of the room and is being picked up by those front arrays, we are going to use the speakers in the back of the classroom to provide the highest level of reinforcement. So the volume at the rear of the room would be higher than closer to that particular professor because we're accounting for that distance. So as we get closer to that microphone, the volume level can decrease because they can hear somewhat with their own ears. And we're just amplifying so that it's intelligible and that they can hear just as well as the individuals in the front row of the classroom, who, by the way, don't need any reinforcement at this particular time because they're close enough to hear that professor with their own ears. Now, what about if a student in the rear of the room asks a question? So we've got this guy in the upper right-hand corner. He's asked a question. We are going to send that audio to the front of the room at the maximum possible volume. We will then drop that volume down lower as we get closer to that individual with the microphone lobe. Again, we're not reinforcing where the student is because those that are sitting next to him can use their own ears to hear him. And very similar, if someone in the back row at the left-hand side asked a question, we have lower levels of reinforcement that just increase the farther away you would go. Again, we're just making up for what is lost in terms of distance. Again, you can see hopefully how this will require proper planning and configuration, but the benefit here is this type of system, again, can be used for reinforcement in the room, for voice lift, as well as distance learning. And if we're talking a little bit about social distancing, you can increase the space between your students, and this type of system will ensure that your students can hear your professor and they can hear each other regardless of where they are seated in this lecture hall. So really powerful solution. This is just a quick example of another lecture hall. This time we've swapped out the MXA 910s for the MXA 710 linear array microphone. Now maybe the ceiling structure didn't allow for the MXA 910 to be used in this space, so we've gone with the MXA 710. The key note here to keep in mind is that the Shure solution is extremely flexible and it is scalable. So we're going to step on down and look at a large type classroom. And what you see here is we have a larger classroom, and in this example, similar to what we saw earlier, but we would use two MXA 910s suspended in this room. Again, we've had that one category cable going to our PoE switch that's providing our power, our Dante audio, and our control. And that PoE switch is also connecting to a P300, which is giving us our connectivity for hardware codecs or software codecs. In this particular space, we'd aim those lobes like we had in that very large lecture hall to pick up the professor as well as the students in the classroom, and we can pick up those individuals for both lecture capture and distance learning. You can also keep in mind that you can swap out the 910s for 710s, And you could also use Intellimix Room in place of the P300 if you had a software codec in this particular space. And this is an example of using the MXA 710 in a larger type classroom. In this example, we've suspended 2 of the MXA 710 over the classroom. And from there, we would basically aim those lobes to be able to pick up each of the students. At the front of the room, we have an SLX-D, which is the new digital wireless system from Shure. We've got a body pack system so that that professor can be amplified as he is teaching. We could swap out that wireless microphone and add in an MXA 710, again, aiming lobes to cover the front area where that professor is and eliminate the need for a wireless microphone on that particular individual. Again, just a quick nod to the scalability and flexibility overall of the Shure solution. So let's look at a medium-sized room. And in this particular example, we have a space that has 4 rows of students, and we're using 2 MXA 910s. Again, same blue connection. That line is indicating your network connection back to your PoE switch. We can then position the lobes or aim the lobes to pick up the last 2 rows in that particular classroom, as well as the front of the room where the professor would be. And that front array can be used to pick up rows 1 and 2. So in this regard, we have a very consistent coverage throughout this space. Again, we can pick up that voice for lecture capture, for video conferencing. And one quick thing to keep in mind, with Shure's MXA 910 or MXA 710, the product offers autofocus, which fine-tunes the lobe position in real time to ensure that you have consistent audio. It's a very slight adjustment. So if someone leans side to side or if they stand up, you can be assured that the audio will remain consistent and the microphone lobe will be moved to pick up that individual. Again, it's a very, very slight movement with that particular lobe. Now, what about if we had that same room and maybe it was reconfigurable, or maybe we wanted to use a soft codec in-room PC to host our processing? In this space, we have the exact same MXA 910s in the same location. And what we can do is we can just aim those lobes a little bit differently to pick up the seating layout. And the Shure MXA 910, as well as the 710, does offer the ability to save presets so that you can really quickly and easily deploy different seating layouts in your facility. Here's another example of a medium-sized space. We've got an MXA 710 on the wall, and we have an SLX-D body pack system for our professor. Again, we can swap that out. We can bring those MXA 710s to the ceiling, and then we can remove the use of the wireless body pack system for the professor and essentially aim our lobes to cover the students as well as the professor area. Now, what about a smaller type space? Now, this small room here might look like a conference room. Maybe it's a collaboration space where your students work together on projects. Maybe it's set aside for professors. In this example, we're using the MXA 310, which is a table array microphone. The MXA 310 does offer steerable coverage like our MXA 910 and MXA 310, but it is only 4 channels with this particular microphone. So you can see we've positioned the lobes to pick up each of the students. So each array has 4 lobes aimed at the students. The MXA 310 is pretty flexible, so there are a number of different polar patterns on board. So you can use supercardioid, hypercardioid, cardioid. There's bidirectional, which is super useful for tables where you can use sort of a figure 8 type coverage pattern. And there's also something called toroid, which is like an omni, but actually has a null at the top so that you can reduce or eliminate any HVAC or projector fan noise that might be coming from the ceiling. So very similar to the other applications, we have a single network cable going to our PoE switch. So that cable is carrying our power, our Dante audio, and our control. And in this case, we can use either the P300 or the Room PC, much like the other examples we discussed. So depending on connectivity needs in that particular space, if you are looking to use a soft codec and you have a Room PC already in there, Intellimix Room is a wonderful choice. If you're using a hard codec, you definitely want to go with something like the P300. Again, this space can be used for distance learning, lecture capture, and even typical video conferencing. So let's look at a mobile application, right? So maybe you can't dedicate resources to each room. Maybe you want to go with more of a portable type approach. In this example, we have a cart which is outfitted with a monitor, a camera. We've also placed an MXA 710 on that cart. Now there's already a soft codec attached to this cart. So we're going to install Intellimix Room, and that will run seamlessly in the background on that Room PC. You'll see we have that switch there as well. That is, again, connecting our MXA 710. That's providing our power. It's providing our Dante audio and our control. And we'd also then connect in our Intellimix Room software application that's hosted on that NUC. So this can be used for video conferencing, distance learning, and even lecture capture. One important thing to note with Intellimix Room is it does make use of the peripherals on the Windows device. So if that particular NUC or Windows 10 PC has an HDMI output, we can use the display speakers and route that audio output via the HDMI cable. And that eliminates the need for any external speakers to be brought into the room and really simplifies sort of the portable cart approach. Now, I think it's just time to do a quick shout out to Intellimix Room. Again, this is a revolutionary software appliance that was released at ISE, runs on a Windows 10 machine, eliminates the need for rack mount, black box DSPs, and allows you to use that existing in-room hardware to really unlock your professional audio upgrade in a soft codec application. It's a really, really powerful, very affordable way to bring in that high quality audio to spaces in your higher ed facility. Now let's talk about some solo applications. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the Motive family. So again, Motive is really designed to be extremely portable. It is plug and play. It's very, very simple and easy to use, compatible with Apple iOS, Mac devices, as well as PCs. And you can see in this example on the right-hand side, we might have a professor there. He might be using one of these devices for lecture recording, personal video conferencing with students. You know, all of this is a really great use of these individual solo type devices. DSP options before I close out. So you'll see here we have a number of different options in terms of our DSP offerings. One that we didn't really talk too much about today is the ANI USB. That's really designed for smaller type rooms, and it supports a single Shure microphone. It does utilize the onboard processing on the MXA 910 or MXA 710, and it supports your soft codec as well as hard codec applications. As we step up to the P300, this can be used in small to large size rooms, supports again both your hard and soft codecs, and it does support as well multiple microphones with up to 8 channels of processing. Intellimix Room, again, it's that application software that we've launched at ISE that allows you to scale from 8 to 16 channels. It is compatible with soft codec systems, and it does support the use of multiple microphones. At this time, it requires a Windows 10 operating system. So just a quick overview of the main DSP options sort of as we wrap up for today. So I'd like to just thank you for your time today. I hope that was a really helpful overview of our high quality solutions for higher ed. The Shure solution truly does offer flexibility and scalability for classrooms that are smaller all the way up to your larger lecture halls, providing that consistent high quality audio for distance learning, lecture capture, and sound reinforcement, all while maintaining any social distancing regulations. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to jot them in the question and answer pane, and we'll get to those at the end. And I'd like to introduce our very special guest, Mr. Joe Wei, Director of Learning Environments at University of Southern California. He's going to share with us a very exciting installation over at USC. Joe?
Hey, thanks so much, Vanessa. You made that really, really easy because I don't have to talk about any of the use cases. I just get to talk about why we did this because you nailed it completely as to where all of our various spaces, how we were going to answer the problem. So just go through really quickly for those who aren't familiar with me. I am the Director of Learning Environments at USC. I also produce and host the Higher Ed AV podcast, co-founder of the Higher Education Technology Management Alliance, HETMA, and the author of Producing Worship. So I also came to the House of Worship side, and my career before coming into higher ed is live entertainment. So I was very familiar with the entire Shure line, of course, and the live microphones. So this was exciting to kind of see a different side of it. And obviously, I had won the 2019 AV Nation AV Professional of the Year. And exciting, this is what I'm about to talk to you about, has recently been named the 2020 Higher Education Integration Project of the Year from Commercial Integrators. So this is going to, as we go through, go ahead and take to the next slide. Tell you a little bit about USC and how we came to this solution, because I think it's important to recognize that we're not just picking microphones for the sake of microphones and DSPs for the sake of DSPs, but to actually solve problems. So really quickly about USC, founded in a private institution, 1880. We have an enrollment of 47,000. 20,000 undergraduate, 27,000 graduate. We have the largest percentage of international students of any R1 university in the United States. And this becomes important when we start talking about our COVID response, because we have a lot of students who can't get here to campus. You're probably all dealing with that as well. We are LA's largest private employer, and as well as we impact the economy by $8 billion a year. We're very, very proud of our sports titles. Fight on. All right, next slide. Now, what happened in this last year, so starting in the end of 2018 and throughout 2019, USC went through our quote-unquote digital transformation, where we really sought to rethink how we were going to serve our customers, look at what services we're going to provide. And what happened is I came on into USC in August of last year, and our CIO, Doug Shook, said to me, I want you to, bring me what's crazy. Don't be afraid to challenge what you're used to. Have the courage to rethink how we do our services, and whatever is going to bring us best, bring to me, and we will see about doing it. So that involved putting my team together, and looking at the state of where our technology was and the direction that AV was going in. This is where my team, we put together a goal statement. And I think this is important because this is what actually came about to help us solve the problem. So the goal statement, I don't want to be Mr. Read your slides, but I'm going to do it here. The only thing I'm going to read, and that is to create a highly available and intuitive teaching and learning educational experience for the campus community through sustainable, accessible, and safe user-centered environments. So with that goal statement, we wanted to rebuild all of our AV, all of our classroom technology, look at this from a larger ecosystem in order to be able to bring that. What we recognized is we needed everything to be frictionless. We needed to be sustainable. We needed to be scalable. We were challenged to think about where everything is going as far as AV in general. We know that we are getting away from legacy devices. AV over IP, the AV and IT convergence has happened. It's done. We're now moving into other areas of UC convergence. Something about USC before we did this enterprise upgrade was that we were very, I'd say we're really behind in a lot of the technologies. We had no wireless sharing. We had no lecture capture, a lot of old push button things. We didn't have a lot of intuitive touch panels. So there was a lot we had to rethink from ground up. So when doing that, go ahead and go to the next slide. That brought us to what it is I wanted to do on the audio side, right? I was challenged to, as much as possible from our ACIO, move everything to the cloud, move everything to software. Let's not have to manage a bunch of black boxes as much as we possibly could. And as I started having this conversation, probably about October, November of last year, with a lot of various reps. And to be honest, I kind of approached everybody and said, this is my goal. How can we do this? And Shure basically stepped up and said, hey, let's talk to you about something that we're doing. And this is where Intellimix Room came in. And to be able to have a DSP that we didn't necessarily have to have a black box for. And there's plenty of use cases for having your box. But what we wanted to see is, how can I now manage this stuff centrally? Our campus is large. And as we start to bring our services together, I sit there and go, if we have a 5-minute SLA, which a lot of us in higher ed do, right? We say, how long is it going to take to be able to support our customers? And we say 5 minutes. Well, that's kind of hard to do if you have buildings that are 8 minutes away, right? So the way we thought about that, the best way to serve a customer that's 8 minutes away is to never actually have to go to the room. So how can we look and be able to monitor and manage and correct from a distance, to be able to do this from our own managed services platform? And that's really where this started to come in. We wanted to move everything up to the cloud and IP-based technologies. If there was an option, I wanted it. We wanted centralized management, remote management, because we wanted to be able to have our customers be able to have a complete white glove service. How could we be able to make it so that they don't think about the technology? We always, I think in higher ed, we preach this a lot, that it's not the faculty member's job to be able to, have to know how to use it. It's our job to. But in the end, we still end up putting a bunch of buttons, and we still put a bunch of gear that still confuses the situation. So we wanted to get rid of that as much as possible and simplify, get everything out of the way. And then focus on the new direction of AV. And that's really UC and soft codecs, being able to use, just for us, most rooms are basically Zoom-ish rooms. It doesn't have to be Zoom. It could be any soft codec. But we wanted to say, is how can we do that? We obviously wanted Dante as far as our audio protocol for transfer, using DDM, and in order to manage all of that. And that's where we brought in many of the NMXA 910s, the 710s, and our auditoriums, where we had a large number of handhelds. We didn't necessarily have, kind of look at your phased budgets. We could be able to use Avio devices to put those onto our network as well, so we could maintain those microphones that may have already just been plugged in into a legacy system. We're excited about next year having Dante speakers now, which weren't out before. So thankfully, our speaker set, we ended up was going to be phase 2 for next year. And now we have an option to be able to keep that ecosystem going and be able to have networked speakers as well. So that part is exciting. And that's kind of how we came about to everything. Go ahead and take the next slide. And these are just some here's the actual system. So Audinate put together a sample line drawing of what one of these new classrooms would look like. And it was actually put together based on my line drawings. So sent them to them and featuring the entire Shure line. So as you can see, what we had done is we used Crestron's UC engine, the Flex system, and may or may not have hacked it to let Shure Intellimix Room live on the NUC that the Zoom client lives on. And that's where, and this was really a great, exciting partnership with Shure to be able to work together to figure out, how can we make this? I don't want to throw a computer in my room. I want to keep the soft codec. And the fact that it was able to work and ensure Intellimix, and I could talk about this all day, but I won't, when it takes over the IO of it and allows now my NUC and my Zoom client to become a Dante endpoint, was basically life-changing for our system. So we let Intellimix Room runs the DSP living on the NUC. We use the NVX 352s, which allow the Dante protocol to be able to be sent between all of our devices, whether for the video, and then as well the MXA 710s, the 910s. We'll be having the speakers coming up. We have, as far as our Dante, as well, assisted listening and large microphones that we were able to bring onto the system. So this is an entire network-based AV system and audio system living together. What was really nice is when we were trying to figure out how to do this. All right, and I'll speaking to everyone in higher ed, putting a bunch of 910s. I mean, this is the one thing, Vanessa, your pictures look really great, but we know that can add up, when you start putting a bunch of 910s places. But the 710, when we tested it, and I will be honest with everyone, as we were one of the beta testers, the whatever testers for the 710, and we had it here on campus. And what we originally put down on our drawings, saying, okay, this room's going to have a 910, this room's going to have 710s, this is how we're going to. And when they actually arrived and we started doing testing, we thought the cutoff was going to be around 20 seats. That moved all the way up to about 30, 32. And we were shocked at how great the 710 was. Obviously, Shure products are fantastic, but when we could have the clarity and we put on the Zoom call and we could hear on the far end, it completely changed everything. So I encourage everyone to get a couple in your spaces. Obviously, depending on the height of the ceilings, the width of the rooms, you have to have different configurations, which Shure was fantastic at helping us figure that out and what the right fit was going to be for each space. But the clarity of everything was just fantastic. So that is the overall ecosystem of all of our classrooms. Again, the beauty of it too is when we end up having this paired with all of the software, and she brought up Designer, and when you can see how easy it is, that basically every one of these systems configures itself. And when it follows the lobes, and how you configure rooms is fantastic and easy to do on an enterprise-wide basis using your templates and going from room to room. So that was fantastic, pairing that with Dante Domain Manager in order to be able to pass audio throughout our entire ecosystem. We looked at things like not just in classroom. This is things where we didn't originally think when designing the system we were going to have to face a pandemic, right? I got lucky that this was already planned before the pandemic ever happened. However, once that happened, we recognized we now needed ways to overflow our audio. We needed ways to, maybe we were looking at ways we could use public safety, those types of things. Can they have a Shure mic in their office that we can now send everywhere else? Those are things that we started to recognize this ecosystem already solved, right? If we have networked microphones, we can now do two-way communication through 5 or 6 rooms that we have to link together. Vanessa mentioned the presets. That was a fantastic part of it. Because we're working with a control system, we can program in the control system the setup of the room. This works great for your flex rooms. We all have those spaces where it's 6 screens around the room, and who knows how everyone's going to sit and which one's going to be where. You put that in your programming. You set your preset and you can configure that, and the DSP can change that in an instant. So those were some fantastic things that we didn't really think about, but we found were really easy to do and easy to scale. So next slide. I think this is pictures of some things. Yes. So hard to make out the 910s in there, obviously, when you get the whole room, but here's some 710s in action. As far as, just so people might be curious, yes, that is a Hudley IQ in there that we use for auto cropping that connects right into our UC engine. The 710s and 910s go into the Intellimix Room, which then feeds the UC engine as well. And then you can see even our hardwired, our Legacy. I don't like using Legacy on the Shure microphone, but let's say the non-Dante versions. We just put an Avio device in there to bring those into the system, bring those into Intellimix. And I don't even think you mentioned it. By the way, everyone recognize when you do Intellimix Room, you get your channels, but you get 8 free Dante feeds that you can take from anywhere. That's like the best hidden perk, where they do the 8 or 16, you get an extra 8. So that allows for your overflow in those places where you don't have to worry about automatic cancellation or anything like that within the room you're in. So you can take those extra inputs from your DVD players, et cetera. And then the far right picture there is our classroom credenza that we custom designed with Heckler, but you can see living in there, it's essentially 2 to 3 rack spaces. It's the flex system that NVX unit goes into that everything is living in. I probably should have given a closer version of it, but that's where the Intellimix Room lives, and that is the entire classroom system. Very simple, very streamlined, very little gear, which is to me is what I love, because I wanted to look at our system and make it as many nodes as possible. If I could take an entire system and make it an encoder node or a decoder node, that's all I wanted. And these products allowed that to happen. Went up fast, which we're all looking for. Can we do this fast? They went up fast. They're easy to configure and all that. I just keep talking about it. So I'm going to stop being a commercial. And I think that's my last slide. If I'm not mistaken, there might be a thank you slide. And that's it. I guess we can probably open up I'm going to turn it back over to you. I think it's questions. People want questions.
Yes, it is time for questions. Lots of great information. Thanks, Vanessa and Joe. So let's dive into the questions here. Vanessa, this one's for you. I think it was when you were talking through the different room sizes. You use the term distance learning. Is this less or far distance in the same room or remote? Could you kind of clarify the differences between those two terms?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was more referring to distance or remote outside of that particular classroom in that example. So we were using the P300 and Intellimix Room to be able to provide that content via hardware codecs or a software codec as well. So.
Great, thank you. All right, question about Intellimix Room. Is Intellimix Room free, and does it act as a Dante virtual sound card substitute, or do you also need a DVS license?
I can take some of that. I can tell you it's not free. Talk to your sales rep about that. And it is not DVS, but it does turn your device into, and probably Vanessa can give more technical things. It acts the same as DVS in a way, but it's a full DSP that lives on the actual Windows side. So it does take over the I/O, and you'll see when you open up Intellimix Room, you'll have the input and output I/O of whatever device it's living on will appear as input and output devices within Intellimix Room. So in the way it works the same. So no, you don't need DVS, but also no, it's not DVS.
Great. All right.
How was that for an answer?
That was a good answer.
Awesome.
Next question. How many microphone units can be connected to a single P300, and how many speaker zones are supported by a P300?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. The P300 has you have 8 channels of processing on that particular device. So it really kind of depends on your application. It depends on, how many microphones you're using. If you're using the internal Intellimix on board, the 910 or the 710, and just using the P300 as an aggregator. So it does sort of depend on sort of what you're doing and how you're implementing that into your space. So.
Okay. All right. In the lecture hall style room, were you indicating that the P300 will handle the mix minus automatically for voice reinforcement?
So I'm sorry, in the
lecture hall style room example that you gave, did you indicate that the P300 will handle the mix minus automatically for voice reinforcement?
Yeah, so we would use that P300 in the example where we had the single reinforcement of the professor into that particular classroom. When you're going to more of a voice lift style, you do need to upgrade to more of a robust kind of DSP.
Great. All right. Is it possible or required to use multiple P300s for larger applications?
So that's another really great question. So we do sort of just recommend a single P300 at this time. You could, though, use the Intellimix Room audio processing software, which does offer up to 16 channels with processing. So that's another option if you're looking to do larger spaces with more microphones.
Great. What is the current availability of the P300 and the ANI USB matrix?
So P300 and Anti-USB have been for sale, have been available for a few years now. We do have a little bit of a back order situation, but we're working through that. So depending on your needs, we can work through that with you with your Shure rep. But they're all kind of available on the market now.
Great. Can the Intellimix software be installed on a Crestron UC engine?
That's
Yeah,
exactly how we do it. The answer is yes. All you have to do is know the admin password. So talk to your rep.
There you go. Next question. Can I use Intellimix on an air gap system, or does it need to phone home constantly for licensing, or can I register once?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it does require an internet connection every 7 days in order to keep the license active. So there needs to be some sort of a network connection there.
Okay. How many MXA 910 can be used with a single P300?
So that's a really great question. So the MXA 910, if you're using the onboard processing, the Intellimix that's found on the MXA 910, you could use, we've tested 5, 6. I don't see why you could not use more than that, but I haven't actually seen an application with that. So again, you have up to 8 channels with processing on the P300. So if you're running that processing on board the MXA 910, I would say with your matrix mixer, kind of 8 is your max. And again, we've sort of tested, 5 or 6 at max.
Great. Okay, and then a question for Joe. Joe, how did you get your web team on board with such sort of a widespread implementation?
Oh, that's a good one. I get that question often because all I can tell you is buy a lot of coffee for your network infrastructure team. Because I know, well, and actually this is a true challenge because a lot of higher ed institutions, and in fact, a lot of locations will block multicast traffic, right? And we'll want to block a lot of network traffic. So with our solution, we are obviously, even by using the NVX system and DDM and all those, this require multicast as well. Obviously, if you're doing just a simple, MXA2 something and a point-to-point, that wouldn't matter. But if you're looking at a larger ecosystem, that's where the conversations come in. We ended up having our own AV VLAN created in order to allow all the proper settings, whether to not have to block multicast, in order to port regulations. We obviously had to override how many MAC addresses could be on every port, all of those various things to make this work. So do talk to your team. The worst thing you can do is bring in all of these new devices and then expect that they can support it, right? Especially as we've moved, and if you're taking kind of that leap, let's call it, into networked audio, and you're used to having something where you've just used normal speaker wire, you've just plugged a standard handheld and lapel transmitter receiver into your switcher. This is a whole different way of thinking, and it requires a whole different group of people to work with. So your infrastructure team, and it could just mean that, you might need 4 or 5 extra network drops put at your lectern, right? Those simple things that you don't think about. Being able to have the right switches that'll work with your, the leaf system that's already living in the building, what you're going to put inside of your racks, or even if they'll allow that. So you do need to work with your infrastructure team early and find the best practices for them so you can make this, as easy as a process as possible.
Fantastic. All right. I think that just about wraps up our questions. So thank you so much to everybody for attending today, and a very special thanks to Joe for joining us and presenting. We hope you learned a little something today. I know I sure did. If you have any other questions that come into your head, you can always visit shure.com/contact to get in touch with our application support team. They can answer questions across a wide variety of audio topics. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.